Good afternoon. We're outside Bristol Crown Court because the Chief Constable and I have been inside looking at what they've done, and they've made significant inroads. We've had extra investment from the government, but there are still serious delays in the criminal justice system, and that's something that we have been discussing this morning. So, Andy, is there anything that you want to add before we start looking at the questions that the public have asked us?
Well, we've had an exceptionally busy month of September so far. So I checked the figures just before I came out here, over 40,000 calls, 10,000, a quarter of them are 999 calls. And what I would say is that we are delivering in significant measure to meet these calls and do the job well. The pressure on the frontline police officers and PCSOs, all of our people, is quite intense. The weekend before last, we had an unprecedented 27 assaults on officers and staff. The weekend just gone, we had a further 9. And I think it illustrates that there's a lot of pressure in society. We're seeing more mental ill health, we're seeing more demand for police services, people in crisis in the community. And I think I would make an appeal to people watching to support your local police, work in partnership with us, help us through what is undoubtedly going to be a difficult few weeks.
Indeed, indeed. So last week the government announced the rule of 6. And what's the police approach in managing these new restrictions?
Well, if we review where we've been throughout COVID, what we did see from March through to April was a significant amount of public support and compliance. We've seen the regulations change as circumstances have changed, and it's fair to say that police chiefs welcome a simplification. So this rule of 6, a simplification, is something that we think is a good thing. People should know what is required of them. Now, our role is going to be to conduct some enforcement, but we would rather we didn't have to do it. Mm-hmm. So we'll be continuing with our 4E strategy: engage, encourage, explain. And when people won't disperse, if they haven't got an exemption or a good reason, we will give them a ticket. So I've spoken to all of my officers and staff this morning. We've got a clear role to help us move through this next phase of the pandemic. We're just going to turn up that enforcement activity by 1 notch. But we want to work with communities. We want to come out the other side closer to the community. So we want to do that in a way that is fair and proportionate, and a way that everyone says, yes, that's necessary. Yeah,
and because we need to bring our communities with us because of policing by consent. But if people insist on having larger groups, then enforcement will happen.
The regulation around gatherings of over 30, which could be an unlicensed music event, or it could just be a big party, the people organising that are at risk of a £10,000 ticket. People in groups of 6, if they won't disperse, if they won't listen to our advice, they will get a ticket. It will be £100. Each further offence, it will double up to a maximum of £3,200. So there is a strong deterrent here, which we'd rather not use, but we understand it's important for us to play our role in moving through this pandemic.
Indeed. So if people witness large gatherings, what do you want them to do?
Well, if they're concerned, they should tell us, and if we're able to, we will respond. So they can tell us. We'd rather, if it wasn't an emergency, you did it online. If it's an emergency, obviously 999, but actually 101. So we're saying online or 101. But bear in mind what I said about those calls that we're receiving, about 3,500 a day anyway. So this COVID work, and I've checked, since the regulation came in yesterday, we've had 66 COVID calls. Okay. I think we're going to get more. Would want people to understand that we can't get to them all, but we'll absolutely do our best to play our role in the 4Es.
And that's working with neighbourhood police in general?
We're particularly working with our neighbourhood police teams, and across the whole force there are almost 700 PCs and PCSOs. And one of the reasons that we want to work with them is that if people are consistently flouting the rules, and let's say dispersing every time, we'll say, look, hang on a minute, we were here yesterday and you dispersed, you're doing it again now, you're going to get a ticket. Oh well, he's enjoying the sunshine. From central government that local businesses will have a clear duty to support the NHS to test and trace. How are the police working with those pubs and restaurants? Well, the enforcement activity around pubs and restaurants is a local authority responsibility. Mm-hmm. We've heard this idea around COVID marshals. I don't know any more about that for now, but that may be part of the setup, presumably run by local authorities. Mm-hmm. But please be reassured, although it's not our responsibility to enforce that legislation, clearly we're very close partners of local authorities in terms of gathering evidence about poor behaviour or COVID security at these premises. Of course we'll pass it on to the local authorities so they can do their bit.
I suppose, just wrapping up, that we all need to take that personal responsibility. This is never going to be enforced by the police alone. We have to, we have to be inconvenienced by these new rules. But if it's for the greater good and it stops these are numbers increasing, and although in Bristol we are at a low level, the numbers have been increasing. If we can stop that, then we can avoid a national lockdown.
I think it's for every leader in a position of public responsibility to do their bit to explain why this is important. And actually we do see worrying indications of a second peak, and we really, I think, would rather all not go down that route. My children have just gone back to school and university. I'd quite like them to carry on, actually have a bit of peace around the house. So it's for leaders to explain. That's what we're doing now, and it's for all of us to do our best to comply with this common sense guidelines. I went on public transport last week and I was really pleased that people were wearing masks. If they weren't, I would have, had mixed feelings, like selfish, reckless, didn't care about my safety, let alone their own. So I would say if we can make this a social responsibility, socially acceptable to comply, and perhaps get into the levels of support and compliance that we saw in March and April, then actually we will be doing very little enforcement. We recognise we might have to do that to encourage people that if you don't comply, something will happen.
Yeah, thank you. And I hope you found that useful. We will come back and do another Facebook Live in a few weeks' time, because things are changing very, very quickly. But I think the real point is that we have to make the difference. We have to follow these rules, and the rules, inconvenient as they may be, the real point, of course, is that we are making sure that we can really make a difference to our society. Thank you.